Hello, friends. Today is February 28th, 2023, and welcome to the Beautiful Future podcast. My name is Sam Song, and I want to invite you to join me on this journey as I navigate a season of great uncertainty and significant change. For this inaugural season, I have been sharing what I've learned in the first 6 months since my cancer diagnosis. And we began with chapter 1, where I shared with you how I'm starting to see each day as my first day and my last day, and how my mindset has shifted from the idea of scarcity to abundance to enough. Then in chapter 2, I shared about the beauty of our limitations and how much freedom we can find when we choose to embrace those limitations. In fact, our limitations are what makes us human. It can be beautiful and powerful. Then in chapter 3, I encouraged us all to just let it go. What are we letting go? We're letting go of control. There are things that is out of our hands and there are things that are in our hands. And so for me, it's an encouragement to focus on what we can control and let go of the rest. And in this fourth and final chapter of this inaugural season, I wanted to share with you how I learned to overcome the overwhelm of overthinking. So today marks the end of a season of life for me, as tomorrow begins a new season. It's the post-cancer season of life. You know, all the tests and the scans came out very positive, and even though the doctor can't say I'm cancer-free, I could live as if I am cancer-free. And so what I did was I decided to name this new season that I'm entering, Nevertheless. Now, this name comes from a quote by Viktor Frankl, who wrote the book Man's Search for Meaning. In it, he explores his experience in concentration camps and the importance of finding meaning in life, even amidst suffering. Viktor Frankl was a Holocaust survivor. This quote of his, "Nevertheless, say yes to life," has inspired me, and his encouragement for all of us to live as if you're living a second life has really energized me and empowered me for this new season. And so that's exactly what I intend to do with this new season of life. Now, I have consistently journaled for over 12 years now. If you look in my closet, I have lots of journals that has documented the last 12 years. And this practice has become one of the most important, if not the keystone habit that has enabled me to do all that I am doing today. Journaling has been the primary tool that has shaped the way I live, the way that I lead, and the way that I create, in all the different contexts that I get to serve in today. However, in the last 6 months since my cancer diagnosis, I began to notice a recurring pattern in my journal entries. It was a pattern of circular thought. And as I kind of delved deeper into the older journals from previous years, I found that there were many seasons where I found myself stuck in a loop of circular thought, unable to find clarity and honestly to be able to move forward in life. In other words, I found myself ruminating, which is just a simple way or a fancy way of saying overthinking. Overthinking is the act of repeatedly thinking about a particular problem or a challenge or circumstance without making any progress towards a solution. I think ruminating and overthinking is what creates the overwhelm in our lives. It seems that during the darkest seasons of my life, I noticed that the duration of the season was actually directly connected to how much I allowed myself to ruminate and to overthink. It just was overwhelming. And so what this awareness helped me, and this happened a little bit later in this journey, like probably January of 2023, I realized that I really needed to change how I journal. And so what I did was I began to think, how am I going to develop some triggers and some tools help me break out of the cycle of circular thinking, to help me break out of the loop. And so I did. And because I did, it has enabled one of the most creative and transformational seasons of my life, all while I'm in the middle of battling cancer. And so you're probably wondering, what is it that I've changed? And so I want to share with you 3 things. Now, there's a lot more than the 3 things, but just wanted to keep it real simple and maybe help you get started in overcoming the overwhelm of the overthink. All right. So, step one is to realize that we all have the tendency to overthink. And I see my overthinking as a coping mechanism. It's a way that I'm avoiding of something or I'm afraid of something. And when I realize that I am overthinking as my coping mechanism, then I ask myself three questions. First, what am I afraid of? Right? Usually it's because of fear. The second question is, what am I assuming? There's a phrase out there that says, when you assume, you make an ass out of you and me. Pardon my language. And then third question is, what am I avoiding? And this is usually the key trigger that helps me to understand that I'm actually avoiding doing something that's hard, but I need to do it because it's important. And so the three questions again is, what am I afraid of? What am I assuming? And what am I avoiding? And at the end of my reflection and answering these questions, I require and force myself to create an actionable response. What am I going to do with the answers to these three questions? I need to create an actionable response, and the rest of the day or the rest of the week, I need to create a plan to execute. The second thing that I've done is I began to track how much time I spend on reflection and how much time I spend on response, right? Some of us who are very contemplative love to spend a lot of time reflecting on things, but not bringing anything to action. And some of us high achievers out there, all we do is focus on action, but we don't actually spend some time reflecting on whether our action is purposeful or intentional. And so what I did was I began to track, and it's a practice I've been doing for a while, but I really focused on tracking how much time I'm spending on reflection and inspiration and curiosity versus how much time I'm spending on actually doing the work that needs to be done. And so one of the things that I noticed as I tracked was I spend way too much time overthinking and reflection, even to a point where I had to create a mechanism where I actually had to limit myself of how many pages I'm writing in my journal. So there's a practice from an artist named Julia Cameron who wrote the book The Artist's Way and many other books for creatives, where she introduces us to a concept and a practice called the morning pages. And this is something that I've done for many, many years. And the idea is to write up to 3 pages or more of free writing, right? Just kind of emptying your mind, putting everything down on a piece of paper. And it actually has served me well for a very long time, to a point where maybe I didn't even need to fill out the 3 pages to empty my mind because I've been doing it pretty regularly. But what I did in this season was actually limit myself to only 1 page, because I knew I was an overthinker and I knew that I just loved doing it. And so what I did was I said, I only have 1 page to empty my mind. And then after that, I'm going to look at it, reflect on it, and get to work. And so because I was tracking my time and knowing that I have a tendency to lean heavy on the reflection versus the response, I actually created limits in my life and in my practices so I could balance the two. And the third thing that I'm going to share with you is what I call the weekly review of my journals. And so it's the end of week review. And what I'm doing there is I'm reviewing my entries and all the different microblogging things that I do to kind of track my life. I'm looking specifically for patterns of circular thought and making sure that I actually break that loop, right? Because if not, I'll just keep doing the thought. And so I need to create a different pattern. And so anytime I see anything that's circular, what I'll do is I'll actually say, what's next? What needs to be done? What needs to be different for me to move from circular thought to progressive thought? And so if you're an overthinker like me and you feel overwhelmed by how much we overthink, I hope these 3 things will provide a starting point for you to kind of change the pattern, to recognize the triggers that's creating the overthinking, as well as just being aware that we have a tendency to be an overthinker. And so this concludes our first inaugural season of the Beautiful Future podcast. I'm so glad that you were able to join us for these 4 chapters. Don't worry, there's a lot more coming. But what I wanted to do is kind of bring this season to a close and then begin the next season, which we'll call Nevertheless. And so thanks for listening from wherever you are and however you're listening. And I hope that what I've shared with you and the insights that I've learned will help you to live that beautiful life so we could create that beautiful future today. Thanks for listening. Grace and peace.